Why is it that you are the most brilliant person in the room, in the meeting, and yet when it comes to you explaining your work or expertise, you get overlooked? What exactly is happening? Thing is, you've done the work, you have the expertise, you know the subject inside out, but when it comes to being on the spot, to having to convey it with confidence and clarity, you flounder. And by the end of it, you're thinking, I know my stuff and it's not being recognized. Well, in this video, I want to offer some insight that you will not find in any other video about communication. And that's because it has to do with how your auditory system processes sound, or more precisely, how the auditory system of your audience is processing the information that you're given. And up till now, you may have thought this is actually all about confidence and it's actually all about how I express myself. Don't get me wrong, those actually may be a problem, but there's something that you're overlooking, which is foundational. So let's get right into it. If you've been trying to tackle this problem for a while, you don't sound confident enough, your words aren't landing, then you may have been tempted to focus on what the words are that you're actually saying. What words should you say differently? All of that so that your message is clearer. There is an argument for that. Of course, if you say words in a more logical sequence, that's better than saying words in an illogical sequence. I am not debating that. However, if you are completely overlooking how your brain processes what it receives, particularly sounds, then you are putting the cart before the horse by just going for logic and not thinking about sound and emotion. Most professionals, when they express their work, think mostly about logic. But here is how your auditory system works. When you receive any sound, it goes first through the part of your auditory system, which is simply going to process what it's hearing as a sound. That's it. After it processes it as a sound, it's going to go to the part of your brain that processes emotions. When you hear a sound coming towards your ear, it's going to get to your ear, go through your ear canal, get to your eardrum, and then eventually get to your actual hearing organ, which is going to turn this sound from acoustic energy to eventually electrical signals that it's going to send towards your brain. Okay? But when it does that, it is just interpreting sound, how loud this is, what pitch this is, how long this sound is. That's what it does first. After it's gone through that, it goes to a part of your brain which is actually involved in emotion. Think about the fact that if you hear a loud bang or you hear something that startles you, you will have an emotion before you process, oh, that's actually just the wind knocking the door. There's an emotional response to a sound before there's a logical response to a sound. You see that in your everyday life, right? There's visceral responses that we have before we have time to interpret the meaning. So, starting from the beginning, you have what exactly the sound is. Is it loud? Is it soft? Is it high pitch? Is it low pitch? Is it long? Is it short? Okay, that's what it's doing first. Then it's what's my emotional reaction to this? And then, only then, do you have a processing of meaning with logic. Do you see where I'm going with this? The professional that starts with, I just need to make this more logical, and does not think about what is the actual sound of what I'm saying and what is the emotional component of what I'm saying, will address the third and overlook the two completely. But what that means is everything they say is going to get processed like that first, and only then be assessed with logic. If the sound you are making in the first place is pretty constant and your auditory brain is like, this seems like a pretty irrelevant sound, and then the emotional part of the brain feels like, don't really care. Well, then by the time it gets to the logic, your audience probably has this facial expression because it hasn't been given a reason to care. And so in essence, when you are seeing that, your audience isn't being rude. They are indicating, though, that you haven't helped them answer the question is this worth my attention? And so their auditory brain is like, I don't know if I really need to spend my energy to listen to this. And so, is there a better way to sequence your work logically? Probably, right? Should that be addressed as well? Yes. But if you only address that and you don't address these two other things, then you may find that your problem doesn't get any better. And this is the gap that no communication expert is talking about. But the best news in all that I'm saying is that this gap is closable. So let's talk about 3 specific things you can do in order to increase the attention and care about what you're talking about anyway. Now, the first is to stop starting with the background and the context and the case studies and the caveats and all of the things that nobody in your audience cares about. That's the first thing. People are so used to a specific format that a lot of people give presentations in. Like, let me start with the background, and here's what we did in 1952, right? And that tells the people in front of you is, man, this is gonna be long. And the reason this is completely working against you is that when you start your presentation, that is prime real estate for the auditory system. Whatever you start with tells the auditory system to tell your brain, oh, this is worth paying attention to, or it's okay, this is not going to be good. And you are absolutely wasting it if you give background and context that is dry and humdrum, that is not going to incite your audience to listen on further. What you want to do is to start with something that they absolutely care about and then go on. Even if there's some facts and figures that you have to get in there, do not start with them because people will not follow along with you. Switch it around and put what the audience is longing to hear or doesn't know about or is going to spark intrigue. Put that at the beginning so that in the middle, when there's a bit more of a lull in attention, they're still with you because you gave them something at the beginning that said, oh, let me keep listening and see where this goes. If you start with the boring, it's very hard to buy back their attention. So let me give you an example. Instead of starting with, in this presentation, I am going to talk about all of the reasons why you should adopt the new program that we have installed, you're going to do something else. Let's say you are speaking to stakeholders. You're going to say, the new program we are implementing is going to increase our revenue by 50%. Here's how. From there, if you have to give background and context, you can do so. But at least the people in front of you know, okay, I'm listening out for how this project is going to increase our revenue by 50%. That's something that stakeholders care about. Now let's talk about the second thing then, which is highly related to the first, but is more specific, except it is also extremely simple. And that is, instead of speaking about this is what we have done on our team, and this is what I have spent the last 6 months doing, and here's what I think about what the company should do, flip that and turn your eyes into, there was a fly. Flip that and turn your eyes into use. That's going back to the question, why should they care? When you keep that front and center, you are enabling the audience to see that this presentation is meant for them. Going back to the auditory brain, it switches on and says, okay, this is information that is directed at me, so I'm not wasting energy by tuning in. You give them a reason to keep listening. So look at your ratio of how many times you say I and how many times you say you. And you want that ratio of you to I to be high. This is helpful not just for your audience, but also for you. It is so tempting when you have an area of expertise just to talk about how much it means to you. That doesn't move you forward or gain you any influence in front of your peers or bosses. If you flip it and you are able to articulate how what you know affects them, then you will never be lacking in influence. And listen, it sounds like a small thing, but it is absolutely not. Do not overlook this in your next presentation. Make sure your audience knows this presentation is about them. It's about everything that they stand to gain from whatever it is you are doing. And then point number 3 is Keep this question front and center in your mind. Are you ready for the question? Drum roll, please. The question is, what do I want my audience to think, feel, or do differently after having heard me speak? This question is absolute gold, and it's one that comes from Darren LaCroix. He's a world champion of public speaking. The reason this question is gold is that it keeps your audience focused and it also keeps you focused. If you are a professional with a lot of expertise, I can bet my bottom dollar that you struggle with rambling and talking for days upon days, or that's what it seems like from your audience's perspective about your expertise. And so, what you want to do then is keep that center in your mind to remind you of why you are talking. You're not just talking to share your expertise, you are talking so that there is a before and after moment in the life of the audience that they can leave there and do something differently. Because where people often trip up is that they get tempted to say everything they know. Instead, when you start with this question and allow it to guide you through everything you say, your audience is able to separate the wood from the trees. They're not drowning in a sea of brown and green. They know this is what I am intended to take away. It's clear to me, and I can take exactly that without all the fluff that goes with it. Without this, your expertise is actually what is detracting from your influence because there's so much of it that people don't know what to do with it. They don't remember anything and they don't know what they're supposed to take away. When you lead with this question, it becomes your natural filter and it helps you to have a through line that people know they are following. There is no replacement for this. So, what do I want the audience to think, feel, or do differently after having heard me speak? Now, your audience know where they're going and they are far less likely to tune out. So, now let's come back to it. The problem that you are facing of being overlooked when you share your expertise. You are doing yourself a huge disservice if you think about it only as a how have I structured my argument kind of problem. I want you to think about it in these terms. Your presentation is processed first as a sound. Sound needs to be interesting to start with in order not to lose them. If you're interested in that, watch this video. It'll pop up somewhere. I don't know where. The second is the emotional component. That is, well, what do I feel about this sound? And different sounds convey different emotions. That is step two in your presentation being processed. And then finally, if it passes those and your auditory brain thinks this is something exciting, the logic of it is going to get processed differently. Think about this simply in these terms. If I was to talk like this the whole way through, even if what I was saying was extremely compelling, it would be very hard to follow. Nothing to do with my content has changed. But if I were to talk like this, and nothing changed in my content, then something about how I am speaking now would be easier to follow. It conveys a different sound and it conveys a different emotion. But specifically, what I've spoken about in this video is pay very good attention to what you start with. Your audience remembers this best, but it also indicates to them whether or not they should keep giving their attention to you. So give them a reason to care from the get-go. The second is turn your eyes into yous. When you are tempted to talk about all of the expertise that you have, or if I were speaking, all the expertise that I have, and this is what I did, and this is what I did, and this is what I am going to do in the next term, then you are more likely to lose your audience. Instead, start with you, your audience, what it is that they are going to gain, and they're far more likely to follow along with you. Finally, ask yourself this golden question. What do I want the audience to think, feel, or do differently after having heard me speak? And that will keep your focus on that, and you will see the massive difference that that question alone makes to how you structure your presentation and how much detail you actually remove from it. So in your next presentation, pick one of the three, choose them. Just say, I'm going to think about my audience more and increase the number of times I say you, decrease the number of times I say I. Just that one alone. Implement it in your next presentation. As you can see, the tips that I'm giving out, yes, they have to do with communication, but really, this is about auditory science and how it can make you a better communicator and leader. So if you are interested in that and getting tips that you're probably not going to find in other places, well, subscribe. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been my pleasure to share this video, and I will see you next time.